Hello, and thank you for joining me for today's taping of Pod Bites. I'm Verna Collins Odoom, and we are talking about some of the fallout from a story that dominated the news last week. It was January 6th, not even a week into the new year, and exactly 2 weeks from Inauguration Day, when insurrection stormed through our nation's Capitol building. The images were almost unbelievable. Legislators and staffers forced to take cover, fearing for their lives, being evacuated from the Senate floor while armed rogue vigilantes tried to get into the Senate chambers. It was during a time that electoral votes from the November election were being counted and recorded. Due to copyright concerns, we are not using any of the pictures on Pod Bites that aired on television, but most of us have seen those images. The mayhem started in the early afternoon and took much of the day for the chaos to be subdued. And then finally, at 9 in the evening, legislators re entered that room from which they had fled earlier that day and reconvened to complete the job they had gathered to do, to certify the Electoral College votes and to formally declare Joe Biden as the next president of the United States and Kamala Harris as the next vice president. So, our question: after such a traumatizing and explosive situation, how challenging might it have been for legislators to just get back to business as usual? Here to talk about that with us is Robin Campbell. She's a licensed clinical mental health clinician as well as a consultant and coach. As a licensed professional counselor, she works with individuals, businesses, and other entities on issues of mental wellness. And all of this falling under the company she founded, Arise Innovative Solutions, which is based in Greensboro, North Carolina. Thank you for being with us today, Robin. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Verna.
Okay, I appreciate talking to you. I am starting our clock, of course, to keep us on track for our 10-minute discussion now. As a clinician, Robin, how difficult do you think it was on that day for legislators to go back to what was really the scene of a crime where the attempted overthrowing of the Capitol had taken place and they had to get back to that job of verifying those votes? What do you think?
I know that it was extremely difficult to go back to business as usual. They were on automatic pilot at that point. It had to be a fight or flight situation, and knowing they had a job to do, but then thinking about what they had just experienced. And I understand that they were secured in a room for hours for protection after everything happened. So, looking at all of that had happened, I
Mhm.
know they didn't even have a chance to process what was going on. So they were probably on automatic pilot.
I would imagine so. I've had a few conversations with family and friends. They're wondering how tough it would be for legislators to do their job in an ongoing way. Of course, we've all heard about post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. I want to discuss the possibilities of that for legislators and staffers, even Capitol Police, those who were trying to fight against the insurrection, of course. But first, what might be the state of mind of these people in these first few days after the attempted coup? So we talked about they're just confused right after. What do you think they're thinking about now this weekend when they're getting ready to go back into the Capitol building?
Well, several things come to mind. The first being actually having the opportunity to process what happened. Still in that shock and disbelief, but now that they are away from the Capitol and at home, they are really probably having thoughts in their minds of just what happened and trying to process. But the other thing that I thought about is the COVID-19 exposure,
Mhm.
because from my understanding of some interviews that I saw, some of the legislators were concerned because there were some that were not wearing masks and they were in that tight confined space. So thinking about too their health, and if they were exposed.
So just a lot of stress here surrounding
Yes.
this insurrection and this issue. When a person is dealing with a situation that's evolving like it was on Wednesday, I imagine legislators and staffers went through a range of emotions. The first possibly being shock, as you said, but between the shock and the realization, are there any coping mechanisms at play? What are people doing?
I think as far as coping mechanisms are concerned, it's really important for them not to be engulfed with the news and social media. As we know, when those things are happening and it's constantly happening in front of you, that's going to create triggers and more stress. So, for those persons involved, it would be very, very important to disconnect, know what's going on, watch the news enough to know what's going on, but not inundate themselves with that so they won't be triggered. And something else I think would be good for them to do is to be proactive and seeking some professional counseling. Everyone that was in the Capitol at that time may not experience PTSD, but we do know because it was such a traumatic event, it would not hurt to just go ahead and be proactive and seek professional help.
That's important to think about. I know there's such a stigma sometimes attached to that, but I think the more people talk about it, the less that is there. Professional mental help when you have an issue like this, a traumatic situation.
Yes, I totally agree that you can be proactive in the situation because even with the stressor that occurred, there's going to be a lot of uncertainty that may come up. So why not just really start to talk about it so you can process it?
Okay. Now, I know that when a person is dealing with and trying to process the questions that are going through your head or for how long you're going to have challenges potentially. And that is a little bit of what we want to talk about, talking about the post traumatic stress syndrome kind of situation, looking at whether that is something that people, the governmental pages, you have all sorts of people that were in the building, everybody having their different viewpoint of it between the legislators, staffers, the pages, the Capitol Police, all sorts of people in that building. Post traumatic stress syndrome is a real situation. I wanted to take a look at some information and some statistics and numbers and just kind of see what your thoughts are about them. There is information that we got out of the National Institute of Mental Health, and it
Hmm.
talked about some of these symptoms and issues that people would have to deal with. Some of them called re-experiencing symptoms. I'm just going to run down some of them. Flashbacks, things like physical signs of stress. Then they talk about avoidance symptoms that people go through, staying away from places or objects that remind you of that experience, or trying to ignore thoughts and feelings that are related to the traumatic event. Then there are arousal and reactivity symptoms, being easily startled or feeling a sense of tenseness or being on guard, having difficulty sleeping, waking up a lot, or having difficulty going to sleep at all. And then the cognitive and mood symptoms that go on potentially. Ongoing negative emotions like fear, anger, guilt, loss of interest in enjoyable activities that you used to do, and feelings of social isolation. These obviously are things that have to be, I guess, extended for it to be considered post traumatic. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. If someone is exhibiting these symptoms like a month after the incident, it could be a diagnosis of PTSD. Of course, it's natural for persons to feel stressed out right after the event, but if it lasts longer for a longer period of time, then you may get a diagnosis of PTSD.
And sometimes we want to self diagnose, but to go see
Yes.
somebody would be a good idea. I know you stress that. Is that correct?
That is correct. Always good to go ahead and just talk with someone and to be able to have that kind of support and that awareness.
Now, I know the attention would be on what's next, and we're thinking about the psyche of the people who were in the attack, who were being attacked. But I actually want to flip over for a second and talk a little bit about the folks who were doing the attacking. Nobody wants to really talk about that.
Mhm.
Obviously, maybe not feeling that they deserve a little bit of attention. But when I sit and think about people that would do something like that, I'm wondering what's going on in the mindset of those people. You've been in a situation where you've been fed information. You now are believing this information that you've been told. You maybe have lost touch with reality a little bit. You're listening, maybe a little bit of brainwashing that's been going on. I mean, Mr. Trump
Yes.
had come out, as we all know, before and during, was sending out tweets and various things to kind of encourage people to be strong, as he kept saying in this situation. What is your thought about what folks should do when they feel like there is nowhere to turn, when they feel like they're backed in a corner or you've lost something? I know there's strong feelings that go along with that side as well.
Yeah, so when someone has been backed in a corner and they really don't know how to react, again, education and awareness is very, very key. And when you say about the mental state of those people, they are horribly unstable, first of all. And then I want you to think about, too, the conditioning that has gone on for the past 4 years. That's something that people really need to think about, the conditioning and how a lot of things that have happened in our country in the past 4 years have been kind of swept under the rug. So we really need to think about how that impacts a person's mental state, especially you spoke a little bit about brainwashing. So think about the conditioning over and over again and how it festers and builds. And then it gets to a point where it just is out of control. So that's something that I wanted to kind of bring up when you stated about the mental state of those that have participated, like a conditioning.
Right. With just 2 minutes left, what do you think happens next? What are next steps for those folks? Let's suppose, and we heard on the floor, people who were in the Senate who are planning on backing this effort to keep this electoral vote not going toward Joe Biden, not just saying that they're unhappy. Tell me what your thought was about that. The fact that people turned around, the fact, but there's some people I think that don't necessarily feel that repentance is enough, that coming back now is enough. What do you do to help folks to kind of come back into the fold? Is that our responsibility as mental health people? Where does that fit in to the picture?
Well, again, with those people that did turn around, it's sad, but that it took something like this to happen. So, as a mental health professional, I think it's really important to utilize these opportunities to educate and to like connect the dots so people can understand how serious this matter was. So yeah, I think that's would be really, really important.
Okay. Well, that is really the time that we have here. I know that we talked about a lot of
Wow.
things. Mental health obviously is an important topic, something that touches every aspect of life. I want to just go ahead and help for us to think about some of the topics that we talked about, some of what we call bites here at this conversation, but some takeaways. You talked about, Robin, don't be engulfed in the news. If you are in a situation where you are feeling stressed, watching these clips and this news over and over and over again is certainly not the way to help your mental state. Be proactive. Go get help. If you feel like you've gone a month and you've had symptoms of what look to be post-traumatic stress syndrome, go ahead and get some help. Get the help that you need. Get diagnosed. Speak to somebody. See a doctor, and see what you can do to get yourself feeling better and in a better place. And also, you talked about use opportunities to connect. And you talked about a little bit, and that is our time. You talked a little bit about, I'll finish wrapping up though, about how folks that are on the other side, how they might be feeling, and that they definitely also would need to talk to somebody potentially about their feelings and their concerns, and possibly a counselor, you had said. Is that correct?
That is correct. And just one more little tidbit. I know the timer just rang, but
Mhm.
I just wanted to say when we think about everything that has been going on, it's almost like the United States has been in a domestic violent relationship. There's been a lot of power and control going on, and we really need to think about the things that happen in that whole cycle of domestic violence, the privilege, the coercion, the intimidation, the blaming, the minimizing, and denying. So, a lot of these people that have been conditioned and supporting this, it really has been a very unhealthy relationship.
And coming from various sources, as we've heard and as we've seen. So all of this great to take into account and to take under thought. Thank you so much.
Yes.
We appreciate your time again for talking to us today, your input, your efforts, and all of that to work and deal with folks who have and help folks deal with mental health issues. I just wanted to say, if any of you have an interesting story and you'd like to be featured on podcast with Verna, send your idea to podbites with Verna at gmail.com. That's podbites with Verna at gmail.com. And we can take a listen and see what we can do. Thank you so much. We're going to be back here next Sunday with another edition of Podbites for the rest of the day and for the rest of the week. I hope you have a good one. Bye bye.